There are 23 new coal mine proposals in New South Wales alone, equivalent to the production capacity of 15 Adani coal mines. How is this so when coal globally is in decline? Why are we ramping up coal production so vigorously? The reason, according to a TAI, the Australia Institute report from Rod Campbell and his colleagues, one of the real problems here are independent expert reports. And independent experts themselves, of course, who are neither independent and in many cases not particularly expert, particularly if you're saying the coal price is going to be flat in the next 10 or 15 years, or it's going to actually go up.
Tell him he's dreaming.
It's complete nonsense. These reports are complete nonsense. The claim that these people are independent is nonsense. They are paid for by the corporate client, by the coal miner. In addition to that, they get hundreds of millions of dollars, all of these big four consulting firms, a year from the federal government, 600 million plus. That means that they're not independent of government either. They are guns for hire. They are economic prostitutes.
Chef, what's a prostitute?
You children are going to get me in trouble with the principal again.
These people, these independent experts, are in the business of fantasy. One of our favourites of all time, was the extravagant claim by Chevron, the US oil giant, where the Chevron executives sauntered into a Senate inquiry to justify their enormous mega developments in Western Australia. They dusted off this report by Akhil Allen, that do economics consulting, and claimed Chevron would be contributing $338 billion in taxes and royalties over the next couple of decades. That number is far closer to 338 cents than it is to even $10 billion. Chevron has paid nothing for many years in taxes. Its royalty payments, thanks to a faulty royalties regime, are also incredibly low.
$2,000, huh? I know a guy can turn that into
Nothing.
dollars. And it's me.
We just published a story by Pete Milne, who runs the Boiling Coal website on oil and gas. Milne is taking a run through all the financial statements of the major oil and gas players, and he's found in the notes, buried deep in the accounts for Shell Australia, they are effectively admitting that they will be pulling $4 billion a year out of Prelude and Gorgon without paying 1 cent in either royalties or tax. Nothing. Yet here we have Chevron that still has not resiled from its extravagant, ridiculous claim that it will contribute $338 billion to the Australian economy. This is just complete and utter fantasy. The other beauty from Akhil Allen, the independent expert, was a report just when the approval was about to take place for coal seam gas fracking at Narrabri. They sally forth with an expert's report for Santos, which claims that demand for gas is flat. It's not flat, it's been going down. The gas cartel has such a stranglehold over the Australian market that Japanese consumers buy Australian gas more cheaply than we do. The prices are too high, they have killed their own market, so demand is falling. But that doesn't stop Akhil Allen from coming out and claiming that it's flat. Just nonsense. They're just taking money, a lot of money, to do these supposed experts' reports and just filling them full of falsehoods. The other thing that doesn't make sense, of course, is the New South Wales government system. Well, indeed, the national energy policy, because all these projects are approved separately. They're not looked at in toto as a whole. This is a big problem because if they're looked at as a whole, not only would the environmental impact be much broader, but also the effect on the coal price. Flooding the market with coal at a time when coal is falling globally is not a sensible thing to do economically. But if you want to actually find out what's really going on, you would never go to an independent expert's report because they're not independent. They're dependent experts. What you would do is you would go to the financial statements of these companies and you would see that they are writing down the value of their assets. They're trying to sell out of coal mining, not get into it. This is a dying market, but for Australia, the stakes are extremely high. And that's why, for fossil fuels, gas as well as coal, you will see the New South Wales Deputy Premier, John Barilaro, over the weekend dressed up in his high-vis New South Wales mining garments, along with some other politicians. New South Wales mining Mining in general in Australia still has a lot of money, and that is going to really be brought to bear with independent experts, with political donations influencing politicians, with promises of further political donations which don't even have to be revealed for another year or 13 months. All these things are at play at the moment. I was watching the rugby the other night on the television, and both the Queensland Reds and the New South Wales Waratahs both had Santos sponsoring them on their jerseys. Why would the competing teams be sponsored by the same person? You don't go down to the gas station and say, fill her up with Santos, please. This is not a consumer market, but they're signalling to the government that they are here, they are important, that they have a social license to operate because they contribute to the communities. That's what this is about. There is no standard for economists. If you're a lawyer, a doctor, you have to adhere to a professional standards or to a professional code of conduct, to various standards. If you're a journalist, you're meant to tell the truth. You can see that that doesn't always happen, but economists, they have no professional standards authority. Anybody, you or I, anybody can call themselves an economist. You don't even have to have an economics degree. There is no board of economists, there's no association, there's nobody to complain to. And so they do. They just lie, and nobody ever complains. They're a complete joke. But the problem right now with the climate emergency is that these people's names, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, and their peers, are being used to sprinkle the holy water on all these coal projects, to justify them, to give them the green light, even though palpably their claims are wrong. So Rod Campbell, the chief economist at the Australia Institute, is calling for an authority of economists, for a code of conduct, so that they can't lie, so they can't misrepresent facts for their clients. Of course, the preferable route in all this would be like the old days, to have a strong, independent public service, which could give credible advice without having to run off to PwC or EY and pay them a whole lot of public money to come up with false assumptions. Unfortunately, the public service has been so outsourced, so privatised, and so cowed and trodden upon by politicians. The era of the independent bureaucracy has gone. There is no longer frank and fearless advice. In New Zealand, of course, public service advice has to be published a few days after it's been made to the government, to cabinet. These cabinet papers are released. It's all a secret here in Australia. There's no transparency. So what they do, they trot off to their independent experts, pay them to give a report with the outcome that they desire. As the old consultants joke goes, they say, give me your watch and I'll tell you the time. John is clearly not dirty enough. He needs to pursue the Matt Canavan strategy of rubbing some black stuff on his face to look like a real miner. Like this video if you'd like to see John get down and dirty. You might notice that we're back in the living room. We're out of the studio, back in the living room. There's a concrete truck outside. It's busy and noisy anyway with the dress shop downstairs. So if you'd like us to be able to afford to soundproof the studio, to bring you higher quality content, then chip in $4 a month on Patreon.